Hello, everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel. We are going to have another episode of How to Save Your Life. Today, we are talking to Debra Lundberg, and she has come here to share her Course in Miracles story with us. So thank you for joining us today, Debra.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with a couple of questions just to get us going. How long have you been doing A Course in Miracles?
Well, to tell you honestly, about 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
I started in 2008.
Okay.
After a 10-year waiting period where I only had Love is the Answer, the book by Gerald Jampolsky and Diane Sinsis. How do you pronounce her name? Cirin. It's Italian.
Okay. And is that a Course in Miracles based book?
Yes, apparently Gerald Jampolsky and Diane, his later life, were friends with Helen Schuchman.
Okay.
They were very good friends with Helen before she passed ahead. And they were the only ones that I know of that were given special permission to write a more, he was a PhD, psychology major, like she was, like Helen Schuchman and William Thetford, and they got permission to write this psychology-based book based on the Course in Miracles.
Oh, sweet.
From the Foundation for Inner Peace.
Okay.
And, I was taking my daughter, who is severely handicapped, to a alternative brain treatment, and there was a bookshelf by the counter when I was checking in at this brand new doctor's office, and I think he was a chiropractor, I don't know. Anyway, the bookshelf said books to check out and no cost, and bring them back at your next appointment. And the book that stood out 10 years prior to starting the actual Course in Miracles was this Love is the Answer book. And I got it off the shelf and I read it. Over and over, I bought it, copies for people. I loved it. And realizing it was a takeoff, if you will, of an actual book called A Course in Miracles, which I had never really even seen a copy of.
Right.
I was Mormon. You know, what business did I have with reading A Course in Miracles book? This one was okay. And so for 10 years, off and on, I began to ask, can I read A Course in Miracles now? Is it time to read A Course in Miracles now? And you have to remember, in the Mormon church, or maybe just realize, in the Mormon church, we have the opportunity to receive personal revelation. And I was quite good at it. I received personal revelation, and I loved Jesus. Growing up, being born Catholic and growing up Catholic, my white Catholic Bible had everything that this Jesus person had to say in red letters, and I loved him from the time I was born until about 3 years ago. But that's a little bit later on.
We'll get to that. Okay, so you've been doing the Course in Miracles for a while.
For 15 years. I finally, in 2008, without even asking, it just came to me, oh, you can read the Course in Miracles now. And I thought, oh, wonderful. I went to the library and I checked out a copy of A Course in Miracles. That was a 2-hour drive. I brought it home. I opened it up. I sat down at the table with a notebook. I began to read the preface. I started to take notes, and I realized that I had nearly copied the first page of the preface verbatim, and I needed to do something else, like get my own copy. So I did. I called my daughter, who was an awakened soul at that time. She also awakened, not coincidentally, in 2008, an awakened Mormon. It was exciting. And
can you define what you mean by awakened, please?
Oh my goodness. This gal started to hear a voice, and it was the voice of an uncle that was dead. And she turned to me one day as we were sitting at the table and said, Mom, do I know a Clay? I said, well, yes and no. You wouldn't know him. He died when you were a baby. But yes, Clay Boyle, why? And she says, well, because he's talking to me. And so we went through that whole process of deciding whether she was schizophrenic or spiritually gifted.
Right.
And of course, it turned out she was very spiritually gifted. It turned out that she is a soul that came from the 8th density. She's very advanced. And she wanted to be my daughter, and I wanted her to be her mom. That was the arrangement we had in our pre-life contract. All of this was learned much later, but
Yes.
she awakened in 2008, the year that I got to start the Course in Miracles.
Right. Okay.
The actual Course in Miracles book. And so I began to read the Course in Miracles, and my husband at that time also began to die. He was diagnosed, and within 3 months, he passed ahead from a very aggressive cancer.
So that was a really good time for you to be doing the course.
It was a very good time because I had divorced him and then received word that I was to come back and remarry, unbeknownst to me why. And it was at that time that he decided he was going to leave the planet. And I was going to have that experience. And what an experience it was, because I just surrendered the whole thing. And I had the surrender experience of my life. And that was in 2009.
Okay,
and so
so
your in 2008.
So what was your experience of doing the lessons? So you've had a long lead up to the course. You've been studying this other book that was written by Helen's associates. What did you think of the lessons, and how did they go?
Well, needless to say, I moved in with that daughter. And in 2009, my daughter and I started a support group. We started a study group, a Course in Miracles study group. And because Carmela was awakened and she was talking with Jeshua regularly, we call him Jeshua now. At the time, we called him Jesus. She was talking with Jesus. We had, my husband had passed ahead. There wasn't anything we couldn't ask. What we didn't understand, we just asked her. She never even cracked the book. She didn't even have to read it. Okay. She would just give answers from Jesus. And so we had this year of A Course in Miracles study group, and it was incredible. It was during that time that I was able to have the forgiveness lesson of my life, because the husband that had just passed ahead had molested Carmela when she was 15.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it was during that year, that study group and reading the Course in Miracles, the actual Course in Miracles after 10 years of Love is the Answer book, and just going back to her and crying and wrenching and just angry. And how can I forgive him? How can he be innocent when he's not? And how can I forgive him when he did this heinous thing? I don't get it. And
so this molestation surfaced during your year of doing the lessons? You didn't know about it before?
I did, which is why I had divorced him, which is why it was so hard to get back together with him, because I had this unfinished business that I needed to help him pass ahead and also have this incredible experience of surrender during the 3 months that he was passing, which was amazing in and of itself. Actually, I didn't, after 40 years in the Mormon Church, I didn't know what forgiveness was. I still didn't know what forgiveness was. And it wasn't until I had the Course in Miracles that I could understand that I wasn't forgiving him. I was forgiving my perception of him, was judging him. I had to make him God's innocent son.
Yes.
And I had to forgive me for putting this judgment on God's innocent son. And I know might still sound a little bit whacked out to somebody who said, look, he was guilty, he was caught, he admitted it,
Yeah, but as Course in Miracles students, we understand what the forgiveness practice is for and how it works. It's not the forgiveness practice of the ego, which is what most people are using, right? Obviously, they think, you know, you're a separate being, you've done something bad, I'm going to do my best to forgive you, but I'll never forget what you've done, kind of thing.
Oh, and you hurt me, and you
Yeah.
hurt my daughter, and all of it, all the drama, all the trauma, it was there. The molestation was on the light side, I'd like to say,
Right.
as opposed to the heavy side, which is why I could handle getting back together with him. Also, that the church, you know, kind of encourages working it out, and the Mormon church and that sort of thing. So yes, the lessons were basically easy because of Carmela, but hard on the other hand, because I had this forgiveness to do, and that was the whole purpose of the group and getting together. And so my experience of the results of that, of course, was phenomenal, in that I got the forgiveness lesson of my life, and didn't get that from 10 years of reading.
It has to be experienced to get it. Yeah.
And 40 years of Mormonism, a lot of experience there, but nothing like true forgiveness to bring out that true experience.
Right.
And it was after that that I had my awakening, my apocalypse, my lifting of the quilt, if you will. Jeshua's, wording through you, lifting of the quilt, and being really able to see this reality that I had never seen before, not being born and raised in the Catholic environment, and then joining the Mormon church at age 14, and 40 years of that. And then a year of working on that forgiveness, like my life depended on it, because it did. And how wonderful to finally awaken in 2010.
Can you describe what you mean by your awakening? What happened to you, and what was the shift in your perception like? How did that work? Because sometimes we use a word and somebody won't know what you mean.
Absolutely. Right? I perfectly understand. In the Course in Miracles, my understanding of the Course in Miracles was that you had this opportunity to hear this voice of truth. And I didn't really understand what Jesus meant by that. And really, it's my understanding that I awakened to a voice of truth, and that voice was Father. It was God. It was the most incredible experience, because think about it, Catholic, then Mormon, very active in both, but I had no idea what God was. If you ask me, what is God, or what does he say, or what does he think, I would tell you, who knows? I don't know.
So did this voice come in a form of knowing, or did you actually hear a voice?
Yes. The answer is yes. It was a weird.
It was both of those?
Yes, because it wasn't to my physical outer ear. And yet at the same time, it was indescribable, because it wasn't in words, and yet it was.
Okay.
The concept was there, so that was the knowing part. And yet the words were there, but they weren't words that I would use. They weren't my words. They were words I just wouldn't use. Oh, I just wanted to show you. On this planet, freedom is mandatory. I got that idea from you. You had a shirt that said,
that's a great, it said, in Canada, freedom is mandatory.
Freedom is mandatory. And my higher self said, okay, so what happened was I had the Father, I heard the voice, and then sometime after that, one of our study group members called up and said, this was in 2010. He said, you need to get your own Jesus and stop relying on Carmela's Jesus. And I said, why? I live with her. Anytime I want to know something, I just ask her. And he said, no, you need to do that. Well, in 2012, she went brain dead. This lovely, beautiful, awakened soul that we relied so heavily on went basically shut off in 2012. Very interesting year for her to check.
Well, that was the year I started channeling.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
Well, 2012 is a historical date. So Father basically turned me over to Jesus. And I kind of had my own extension from 2010 of Jesus. Carmela had gone brain dead in 2012. I married at the end of 2010 and began yet another Course in Miracles study group, which is my husband and myself, a private 2-people study group,
Okay. Yep.
a Course in Miracles study group with Jesus. And then I actually met you 3 years ago. Do you recall attending? I just have a note here. Miracle in the Mountains.
Yes.
Retreat in North Carolina.
Yes. I'm sorry, I don't remember meeting you there.
No, I don't. I wasn't there to see you anyway. You were like just one of the attendees. As far as I was concerned, I was there for JM.
Okay.
Because
Yes.
I had been a big JM follower.
Yes.
And that's when I got into you and your channeling. And at that time, I purchased the white book, Jeshua's autobiography.
Yep.
Jesus's autobiography. And when I got home, I purchased every other book you ever channeled.
Okay.
It was at that conference that I had an out-of-body experience. And it was at that conference that during that out-of-body experience, I was told that Jesus was now going to turn me over to my higher self. That was 3 years ago. And I must tell you, that was the hardest thing I ever went through. That was much harder than having to forgive my husband for molesting my daughter. And I know that sounds crazy, but when you have loved someone your whole incarnation, and suddenly you're told, well, your best friend is moving away and you're going to be turned over to this stranger. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have to dig her out because you don't know her from Eve. And what do you know? I call her beloved. I call her a her. I don't know
how is beloved showing up in your experience in the same way, in the knowing and the...
It's the knowing and the verbiage, both. Sometimes I get visions. Sometimes I'm only given a vision. And also, since having my beloved, because Joshua told me, he says, you know, eventually you're going to have to give me up. He says, the book of the A Course in Miracles is not a savior, and neither am I. You're it. And having learned that after, you know, years and years of A Course in Miracles, every year when we would do A Course in Miracles, when we would start over, my husband and I, Joshua asked us to get a new book. He says, remember how you said you were going to keep that first Course in Miracles so pristine because it was the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? Oh my God, this rice paper and this gold edging. And I said, yeah. Well, we marked that up the first year. And then the second year, we got a new one and marked it up. And he said, I want you to get a new book every year. He said, for one thing, who wants to read last year's Revelations? You know, and for another, you need to not attach to this book the way you attach to your scriptures.
Yes.
In the Mormon church. And so we were good about that. Now, it has been 8 years since my husband and I have graced the Mormon religion. We graduated. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. You have to know, I served in the temple. I served a full-time mission when I was 42. I loved it, but we graduated.
Right.
And Joshua asked me at that time, he said, I would like you to stop attending church. I said, yeah, fine. He said, I would like you to wear only white from now on. Where in the Mormon church, in the temple, you wear white. And he says, I want you to wear white all the time. And then he said to me, and stop dyeing your hair.
Oh.
It was at that time
Well, you and me both. It was about 4 years ago that I stopped coloring my hair. Yeah.
It was 2015. He said, and stop dyeing your hair. I said, Of course.
Sure, there'll be
Anything
people.
else?
I'm sure there'll be people who are watching this that will be like, "Why can't you dye your hair?"
What's wrong with that?
Did he tell you why?
He did. It's important to understand that I have, for 40 years, I have had secondary Addison's, tertiary Addison's. I have a life-threatening disability, if you will, dis-ease. And he gave me a gift that I call the smooth channel. And the smooth channel is kind of an angle, if you were. It's a perspective that makes everything smooth and easy for me, because if I work too hard or stress too much, I was warned that my adrenal would fail again.
Okay.
It has attempted to fail 2 other times. I tell people, even God doesn't want me, because every time my adrenal gland fails and I think I'm leaving the planet, I get this miracle cure and I'm still here, you know.
Right. Okay, so that's a wonderful story. Obviously, your spiritual life has played a huge part of it sounds like it's really the dominant part of your life. But for people who are just coming across this video and haven't done the course and are considering doing it, listening to your story, why should they do it? Why should they take the course?
Absolutely. I have obviously studied much. I have, as I stated, I was kind of following JM for a time. And I have read, prior to A Course in Miracles, many spiritually truthful channelings. After A Course in Miracles, I have read many spiritual channeling works of spiritual channelers, and there's much truth out there. But I say that the Course in Miracles is first in my heart, because that's the channeled work that I was reading when I awakened, and I could hear the Father's voice, the Father turning me over to Jeshua, and then for 10 years, and then Jeshua turning me over to my higher self. For the last 3 years, I would state unequivocally, A Course in Miracles is head and shoulders above the rest, because for one thing, it's a channeled work, which of course there's much channeling out there now, not initially, not in 1975.
Yeah.
But it's from the source, it's from what I like to say, the spokesperson for the atonement, the head of the Galactic Federation, gang. Come on, he's the man, okay? He's the man, and he's working the Father's plan of evolvement as hard as he can, and this book is just it. Others are wonderful, but read this one first, and you'll probably end up reading it last. If I had one book to take to an island,
yes, this would be it.
Marooned on, it would be A Course in Miracles, because it's so interdimensional, all in and of itself. I mean, you could read it again and again and again. It's holographic.
I read the text about 20 times over 12 years. Every time, because I'd lived another year or another 6 months or 8 months, it was a completely different book.
Absolutely. It has that wonderful attribute. I do want to tell you, if we have time, how are we doing for time?
Well, we're just going to start wrapping up in the next few minutes.
Okay, I'll just have a really quick thing to share. After I met you, came home, bought every one of your books, and began to read them, it was this book.
Oh, right. This book's really coming up in my mind at the moment. Yes.
It was this book that I had, I get to answer one of your questions, an example of a spiritual experience. Of a lifetime. And I just shared with you, I had quite a few spiritual experiences, and there's so many more. We would have to have weeks and months for me to tell you all my spiritual experiences, but this one was special, because when I got to part 2, and I am actually reading The Galactic Federation Supports Earth's Evolution, by the time I got to Archon, I am experiencing something I had never experienced before. In a way, I had never experienced it, and I'm realizing that I actually am having an imprinting experience with Archon. In other words, I'm literally meeting him energetically, which is, even though I awoke to Father and that I had Jeshua for 10 years, and now I have my higher self, my beloved, I had really never met an extraterrestrial in that sense.
Okay.
And I am energetically meeting him. And then every extraterrestrial after that, in that section, I have the same experience. I have this energetic imprinting, this,
Oh, wow.
my frequency that I am meeting their frequency that they are, and this intermeshing and realizing that I've got intergalactic friends now that can call on me. I can call on them because of this meeting. And that's because of this book and because of you. And that's another reason to read A Course in Miracles, is because it's the book you chose, and it's the book
Well, that book,
for us.
the book really chose me. And you know, when I started the book, I didn't read anything else for 4 years. I was completely obsessed, but not in a negative way. It was just like, why would you read anything else? Because seriously, it's got everything in it and it answers all your questions, really.
I bought
anyway, that's a wonderful thing to hear about the Karma of Chaos. I've never had that feedback before. So for the people who are listening to this, pick up the Karma of Chaos and give it a read. I was actually, believe it or not, I was actually going to start doing some videos where I'm reading from this book, because it actually talks about the Middle East and Nazi Germany and the things that are going on in that part of the world. And obviously, this is very pertinent right now.
It is very much so. I know this probably isn't the best thing to end with, but I just couldn't help it. This is my last copy of, this is probably what, the 6th or 7th copy, at least the 6th copy that I have purchased and then marked up. When I got this book, I was very much Mormon, very active still in the church. And I asked Jeshua, I said, you know, how odd. This looks just like the books of Mormon that the missionaries pass out, this color blue, and it's got this gold lettering. And I said, did you mean that? Did you mean for, you know, because keep in mind, I'm Mormon. True blue, dyed in the wool, reading A Course in Miracles. I have to buy a case for it to hide it. So when I take it to church, people don't give me a hard time. Not now, but then. And Jeshua's reply was, well, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. I always thought someday I would see the color of this book change or the lettering. No, never did.
Well, and as you know, I chose that exact same thing to do A Year of Forgiveness.
Yes, I do. And we have that book as well. My husband has it because he's still working on waking up. But I'm so grateful for him. This was his idea to have me do this. I want you to know he's always putting me up to this sort of thing. I don't go out of my way to do this just because I'm kind of busy, you know, with my own practice of a light worker and doing whatever my higher self puts me up to.
Right. Okay, Debra, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's very inspirational, and thanks for waving the Karma of Chaos in front of the camera, because that is going to be the next thing that I bring to people's attention on the YouTube channel, because it is really pertinent today, and really wonderful to hear all of these lovely spiritual experiences that you've had. I know a lot of people think that if you're studying something like A Course in Miracles, your life is going to be boring, but far from it. It is not boring, as I'm sure you'd concur.
No, because it brings you to this place of reality that is not boring. I mean, reality is not boring. And it's more real than any real that I had experienced prior to the reality of awakening.
Yeah, and much more fulfilling too. I feel my heart goes out to people who don't have A Course in Miracles in their life. And of course, that's why I'm doing these videos, so that people can hear these wonderful stories. And if they've been sort of dipping their toe in the water thinking, oh, it sounds weird, I don't think I can do it. But I want them to understand that it makes your life 100 times better. It gives you the ability to deal with difficult situations. And yeah, so thank you again. And
thank you.
We'll close here, and I'll have a little chat with you after we've stopped the recording. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And
thank you.
Consider picking up The Karma of Chaos if you haven't already read it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.